This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl, episode 68. In another outrageous act against nature and human life in general, the Trump administration just decided to open up 9.3 million acres of Alaska's Tongass National Forest, one of the world's largest intact temperate rainforests, to logging and other forms of development. Now, of course, somebody who does not believe in climate change or the environment, as we are now experiencing yet another hurricane barreling up to Louisiana, 110 mile an hour winds, perhaps an 11-foot storm surge, while on the other coast, that would be the West Coast. How do you even tell 90,000 to 100,000 people to evacuate from Orange County when another one of these wildfires is going? I just don't know where.
Well, they have those kind of hurricane devil winds, whatever they're called. They're going like 90 miles an hour, and it's just dry wind on a fire. That's just fuel.
It's the Santa Ana winds, the devil winds, and then at the same time we have early snow in Colorado. We have the murder hornets in Washington, and to me, it's just again Mother Nature's revenge against the men who have been causing this planet damage. Hi, Tim Dahl.
Hi. Well, we have all that stuff. This is a tense time, well, environmentally, but just the political environment, the social environment. We have the election on Tuesday, and there's people lined up everywhere, and what it's looks like it could be a potential problem, unless it's a landslide for Biden. The Republican lawyers are basically going to take it to the Supreme Court, and we know how that will end because now it's really stacked. In Wisconsin, they basically said today or earlier, I think it was Friday actually, if all the mail-in ballots aren't received and postmarked as being received by the day of the election and processed, they're going to throw them out. So you have a COVID year. It's just a way of taking away people's votes, basically. You have a COVID year.
Look, they've been trying every single which way that they can, and at the same time, killing people. And I want to talk about this absolutely ridiculous statement by the liar in charge, claiming triumph over and a victory over the coronavirus pandemic just a few days ago, when absolutely wrong. Right now, there are more than 70,000 new cases a day, 226,000 deaths in America. And a recent report from Columbia University says that the abject failure of this government under Trump resulted in between 130,000 and 210,000 avoidable deaths.
1,000 people are dying a day. 1,000 people are dying a day. So it's so confusing to me. You know, all he had to do is be moderately good at this. It's strange that he chose to.
All right. Well, look, as he is the super spreader in charge, and actually his rallies have helped to spike infections in Minnesota, Nevada, New Hampshire, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and now Nebraska. I mean, more proof of the con manda in charge. Incredible organizational skills and concern for his peeps were evident in Omaha, when a lot of elderly people, hours in the freezing cold, couldn't get to their cars, couldn't get to their bus. People were fainting, having to go to the emergency room. And they said that some people were suffering from, of course, go to a Trump rally, an altered state of mind.
Oh, boy. Well, tense times. We will see. We touched on a little bit either last week or 2 weeks ago. If he does lose, then what? And there are so many scenarios. I mean, he might go on a nuclear pardoning spree. They think there's some rumors that he's going to fire every head of every department, the FBI, CIA, just to cause chaos on the way out.
That's what he's threatening already. He's threatening that, which is ridiculous.
There's just so much. You know, I didn't realize that Ford preemptively pardoned Nixon. So he could preemptively pardon just all of his crook friends. But can you pardon yourself? I never. And you from federal stuff, state stuff, I don't know. Anything more about Trump? There's other stories that I'd like to touch on.
Well, look, just another incident of his incredible generosity and Christian values, right now the Trump administration is fighting in federal court to block states from giving billions of dollars in emergency food stamps to the lowest income Americans who are suffering, starving, and soon to be evicted from the COVID pandemic. And residents of Pennsylvania and California have sued. I think there's 300 lawsuits against Trump right now. They've sued the agricultural department over a policy that has kept roughly 40% of households who rely on supplemental nutritional assistance, which means they're starving from getting the money. And this is money that was already designated. There's $200 billion designated that these criminals and Mitch McConnell at the top of the fucking list, who just takes off for a vacation without any. This is like starvation benefits that people should be getting. Well, they're in court now to try to stop them. And another thing they're trying to stop, which is just to me absolutely outrageous, is, you know, Obama had this program for homeless people that if you actually give homeless people 70 to 90%, if you actually can give them a home, they basically stay there and get a job. I mean, there's so many reasons why people become homeless, and there's going to be a lot more very soon because people are unemployed, starving, and dying. They're going to be on the streets. And again, another program like, oh no, why give them housing so they can get sorted out and settled? Obama has had this program. Why give, and Trump is in court now trying to take away, it's called Housing First, to help homeless people. I mean, there are people that have 2 fucking full-time jobs and living in their car in this country. Well, and again, there's so many reasons that people are now or will be soon possibly homeless. You can't, and sure, there's a small percentage of perhaps mentally disturbed that don't want to be in a shelter or also, forget about it, or a hospital, but that's a very small percentage. People are working 2 jobs and living in their cars. This is America. The rate of poverty is so outrageous, they won't even tell us what it is. And anyway,
also you can work 2 jobs, have health insurance, and still be bankrupted by having an illness. Everything's wrong. I'm going to change the subject.
I wish you would.
Bobby Lee Allen, 53, and Thomas Gates, also known as the Eunuch Makers, were arrested for an illegal castration. Their partners, kind of 2 bear-type gay guys that live in a stabbing cabin in Oklahoma. One of these sex websites, they lured this young Virginia man, in his early 20s, to basically fly himself to Dallas, where they picked him up, and then they took him to the woods where Bobby Lee Allen would perform a castration on him. And of course, he starts bleeding like crazy. And then Bobby Lee Allen's like, by the way, I'm a cannibal. And, I got human meat everywhere. And the guy's like, I'm seeing double because I'm losing so much blood. But it's like, why the fuck did you agree to this to begin with? And by the way, the picture of these guys, is this couple, they look happier than any couple I've ever seen in my life.
I'm wearing suits with like Christmas lights and Christmas decorations matching. These
2 bear gay guys that just met their soulmate. They're soulmates, I guess. But they're both into cannibalism. They're both into castration as a, I guess, whatever.
I'll find it well, but can you please stitch the man up so he doesn't bleed to death?
Well, they're being charged. They're arrested for unlicensed surgery, maiming, and assault. Basically, the guy's like, I don't feel good. And he's like, the last guy that didn't feel good's dead, and I'm a cannibal, and blah, blah, blah. And so when the investigators came to the cabin, which was on this thing called Mr. B&B, I guess it's a LGBTQ exclusive Airbnb site, didn't know about it. But the investigators found medical tools, blood, and a pair of frozen testicles. But this brings me up. It makes me remember, and I don't know if you remember this, Lydia. We've talked about it. I think it was like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, where this couple in Germany, a gay couple, they arranged for a meeting where a guy would be killed and be eaten. It was a cannibal sexual thing. Well, of course, the man who did it got arrested, but he got good lawyers, and they said, well, it was consensual, it was a sexual thing, and of course, the Germans are pro-weird sex, but they're kind of, since World War II, they kind of, like, they're not really into violence, at least they don't want to condone it. And so where the guy went wrong was, most people, when they have this sexual achievement, whether it's whatever their fetish is, they want some kind of trophy to remember their little victory. The guy kept a hunk of flesh in his freezer, and the contract was he was going to eat the whole body, and he didn't, and that's where the judge got him. He didn't eat the whole fucking thing.
Well, Tim, when I say eat me, I don't really mean it literally.
Well,
I mean, not that, I couldn't use a chunk off here and there, and really.
How long does that take to eat a whole human? It must take a fucking long time. And did you have to eat the bones?
You have to savor it. Well, the bone broth soup. I have no idea.
It's. I mean, when Dahmer was doing his dirty deeds, the neighbors, and it was in the hood. These people were like, "That shit, white people are fucked up. That shit smells like shit." Well,
speaking about being fucked up,
yes.
The NXIVM sex cult leader,
oh boy,
Keith Raniere, 60 years old, says he has no remorse as he was just sentenced to 120 years
120 years, yeah.
As 15 of his former slaves, quote unquote, confronted him, including Dynasty star Catherine Oxenberg's daughter, but it was also who claimed that she felt like she was a human science experiment. What I don't get is, how do these fucking freaks, I mean, all right, I may have a sex cult, but I don't have 17,000 fucking people in it, all right? 17,000 former members of this.
Right.
And then Rainier running a subsect in the cult where women were branded with his initials.
Yeah, branded.
They asked permission to eat, referred to masters. They were
elite stuff. But you know what, Lydia? Let me ask you this, because the fine line when it gets kind of further out in the sex world, that fine line of consent, especially when you're dealing like a power bottom slave scenario, where people are like, "Oh, I'm a table. Tell me when I can eat out of the dog bowl," whatever it is. Brand your initials into me. Is it just like this tipping point where this guy kind of lost his little position and they all went for the kill? Because where does personal responsibility fall into this?
Well, here we go. I mean, it's like, how many people have turned against Scientology or any other organized religion or cult and come out but the thing is, with Scientology, they'll go after you hook, line, and sinker. Thank you, Lee Remini, for that great special on their devious ways.
I'd like to see what the prosecutor said because
this is what he was charged. Let me tell you what he was charged with: racketeering conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, forced labor conspiracy, sex trafficking conspiracy, and attempted sex trafficking, but somehow not rape. Now, what's interesting to me is how Claire Bronfman, an heir to the Seagram's liquor fortune, was also sentenced to nearly 7 years in prison for her role in the cult, using her wealth to silence. Like, there were a lot of Ghislaine Maxwell's involved in this, like the head females controlling the other way. People have the god hole. Well, maybe they have the cock hole too. It's like, I don't get the cult, the religious concept. I don't get how people fall into, but this is the history of human fucking kind. They're looking for something greater to give themselves over to. You know what I give myself over to, Tim Dahl? Myself.
Yes, you do. I have to investigate it more. I'm sure the defense attorney probably had some other people, like witnesses or participants on the stand going, "You know what? I liked it. I really liked all of it. This was great, actually." But, they didn't get, as you said, they didn't get him on the sex stuff. They got him on all this other shit.
Drink the Kool-Aid. Go ahead, because if that's what makes you feel good, drink the Kool-Aid. Well,
speaking of extremely dumb rich people, I'd like to talk about Dubai. I mean, you know what? That fucking city never interests me at all. It just seems stupid as fuck. And they're all like into like, "Hey, let's compete with Vegas, and we're really rich with our Ferraris, zero culture, and these like crazy hotels and all this shit." Well, they just, the city of Dubai is in the Guinness Book of World Records because they built the biggest water fountain in the world, and they're like, "Yay, we're awesome." It's like, no, you're not. You suck. I mean, the UAE. Sorry, not interested at all.
What about them finding in the Great Barrier Reef a construction of coral larger than the Empire State Building? Did you see about that? Just on the other side of everything.
I did not, and oh god, the Great Barrier Reef is heartbreaking.
It is, but then again, they did find something they hadn't seen before, which is this super coral structure taller than the Empire State Building.
That's absolutely
all right,
incredible.
Tim, I have to ask you because you are the animal lover.
Please.
Did you see the article I sent you about the mutant sharks?
I did, but I skimmed through it. Were those mutants or just new species that were found? I both, I guess.
I mean, what is scarier than a two-eyed shark? I guess a Cyclops shark.
A Cyclops shark. These things are so old. When I was a kid in high school, I was living in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which was a big, major East Coast fishing port. And you come across these fishermen, and they'd be like, "I'm telling you, you pull shit out of that ocean you've never seen before." So I mean, like, if you're dealing with that shit every day, you're always stumbling into something fucked up. I mean, 70% of the world is ocean, and there's all types of shit down there. And a Cyclops shark, I think that's pretty cool. I just do.
I love sharks. My great dream, of course, is to ride the underbelly of a shark. But some people have said that they felt the same way when they were in bed with me, that they were riding the underbelly of a shark. I'm like, whoa.
I mean,
there's some blood on my teeth.
Well, soft and stealth, but one wrong move and you're done.
Thank you, Tim. You know me well, babe.
Well, those razor sharp tools can really do some damage.
Well,
anonymous, well, she doesn't want to give her name out, in Colorado, and she's one of these dumb fucking gated communities. She was walking her dog, and she's like, "Oh, there's a full-grown buck deer. Why is it following me?" And then she turns around, and the thing's face to face, and basically just started immediately goring her abdomen. And she's like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" Thing starts going nuts on her. She manages to she gets knocked down, things fucking her up. So then she gets on her feet, she runs away. It's like out of a horror movie. She gets to her dumb McMansion and starts punching in the security code, but fumbling up the numbers, like, hurry up. The thing shows up again, horror movie synthesizer drone, like, bam, and starts just, gutting her and just tearing to shreds at her doorstep, like, oh, and little fucking Fido's on the ground is like, huh? But the dog's doing nothing. So, she runs into her garage and hides between two cars and the thing can't get there. So then, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Officer, whatever organization is called, and they showed up to the scene and described, the deer was described as quote unquote aggressive with quote unquote visible blood on its antlers. Turns out this fucking nutcase woman next door, Tynette Housley, 73 years old, picked up this orphan deer and had been secretly raising it in her backyard and feeding it. So once the thing just wasn't afraid of humans, it just started when it saw a human, it just wanted to be fed all the time.
Okay, for some reason, I don't know why, but this reminds me, and it is Halloween, of a film. I believe the name is Alligator, and I believe the opening scene, it's with Yvonne DiCarlo, not looking good, but that's all right. Robert Englund. I believe the opening scene, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is a close-up of a crotch, Robert Englund, Freddie, and the opening line is, "My name is Buck, and I came here to fuck." Now, I could be getting my horror films and drive-in movies a little confused, but I don't know. It just reminded me of that. What can I say? Freddy Krueger.
Animal-based horror movies, of course. Jaws being the classic. Is there one that you want to see, like something really out there?
No, esoteric? And you know what? I mean,
even Anteater or something like that.
I mean, the opposite end of that spectrum is the Blob. I just don't believe in this crap. The Blob. I mean, I don't know. Grizzly, bear. I mean, first of all, if I'm going to be in the woods, I'm going to be well armed, and there's not going to be a buck sneaking up on me, by the way. I don't think so. No, I'm not afraid of animals, human or otherwise. I say bring it on, motherfucker. By the way, a ballpoint pen in a pinch will pretty much take out anybody, even probably a deer if you get it close enough to the eyeball.
Animals in general, of course, this popular movie that's out right now about interspecies relationships, the Octopus, My Teacher, I think it's called. Octopus, My Teacher, where Octopus and this free diver, I don't know if they fall in love, but they become good friends. And it's a real tearjerker, they say.
Did you see that before or after you grilled some octopus the other night, Tim?
Well, it's funny you say that because Slater was over as I was grilling Octopus, and I'm glad you practiced because because the next time you make it,
You better invite me.
Absolutely. And we all ate it. And then basically 2 days later, Simon calls me up. He's like, you know what? I'm starting to feel a little guilty about that octopus I wolfed down the other night. Yeah. And I said, well, because they're like dogs. I'm like, well, pigs are as smart as dogs. And he's like, well, I don't befriend pigs. And then my question was like, do you befriend octopuses? Oh, and by the way, the plural of octopus is octopuses. It's not octopi. Whenever some asshole's like, it's octopi, it's not true. It's octopuses.
Well, I would prefer if you would refer to me as Octopus Eye from now on. Just to be controversial. Whatever. Anyway.
Octopus, can they see 360 degrees? I know squid
I don't know, but
can.
The thing is, you got to watch out for those beaks. That's where they're most dangerous. They got those little beaks.
The Pacific giant octopus, the biggest one, I think the biggest one I ever caught was 30 plus feet. I mean, those big ones are the ones that are the scariest are those Humboldt squid, which get I think they get up to like 8 feet. And Thor Heyerdahl's Kon-Tiki talks about them, and those things can be fucking aggressive because not only do they have the beak, they have their tentacles, but they have those long 2 tentacles with these like kind of cat claw giant things the size of like a fucking.
Well, I think that every tentacle has
machete.
a different brain. I think octopus have multiple brains, and each tentacle is controlled by a different brain.
Well, and each suction can see, and by touching you, these things are pretty incredible. Let's be honest.
I don't know why it reminds me of the fact that scientists have just invented an artificial human tongue. And I don't know about you, but
what's that used for?
Well, I'll find something to do with it. Trust me on that. I don't know. It's Halloween. What else is there to do?
Is that like for the Impossible Burger, like the Impossible Cow's tongue?
I don't know. I guess for people that can no longer taste with COVID, here's your artificial tongue. Let me know how it feels. Oh, also, one last thing. I did see this thing called like the chili pod, and it's shaped like a big chili pepper. It's a USB. And you plug it in, and you can put a hot ghost viper or any chili into like a little snip of it in, and it will tell you how hot the pepper is. Now,
no shit.
Somebody that likes, I won't go to the ghost viper. I do like it hot, but I think that's a pretty cool Christmas stocking stuffer. Just say.
Do you like the quick slap across the face spice, or do you like the creeper that kind of like, whoa, it's coming out later?
First of all, the tongue actually takes, and I know this from writing a cookbook, about 7 minutes to process the true heat of something that's just not a quick slap on the tongue. So to get the full flavor and essence of actual heat in something, it takes about 7 minutes. So go slowly when you're eating my hot spot.
Uh-oh. Well, my theory about spicy food, it's like loud music. Of course, they both can do damage. But if you're clenched up and you're resisting, it's so much more painful. You kind of have to just open up and go with it. I think you do less damage if you do that. I could be wrong.
Sometimes it hurts going in and sometimes it hurts going out. It's Halloween, and this is actually, there's a blue moon, meaning that's the second full moon in a month. And this full moon is if any of you astrologers are, it's actually a very good time to reassess what you're doing, to clear out things, to clean out, get rid of junk, and go back to finding what pleasure is. But that's what I do every weekend. I'm just saying. This weekend is the blue moon.
When was the last time you dressed up for Halloween, Lydia?
Honey, I dress up every day of my life. Oh, yeah. Come on. I'm in drag every day, honey. Don't let the tits fool you. What do you mean dressed up for Halloween? What are you going as? My night nurse?
Fuck, I haven't. Woo. The few times
You're going as fuck. You're going as a human spermazoa.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the few times in my adult life where I have had to dress up for Halloween, I'm always this last minute. Just what are you kind of thing.
You put a sheet on your head.
Some kind of shit, and I'm like, I don't know. You tell me what I am. I'm just not that creative with
Tim, as long as you don't go as me, it's all good, honey. You can wear a sheet or not. It doesn't matter.
Funny you say that.
Uh-oh.
Funny you say that. I for a split second, I was like, should I go as Lydia? It's like, how would I pull that one off? I don't think anyone wants to see me in fishnets, so.
Well, hang on a second, big boy. Maybe we do.
Oh, boy.
I don't
want to. I don't want to see it.
Well, you know what? Don't look down.
Okay.
All right. Well, I don't know what more to say.
All right, well, who's the guest this week? Actually,
it's Melvin Gibbs. It's a man that's...
a fellow bass player.
an amazing bass player who has done incredible things for the culture of black music mixing with punk, with jazz. Vernon Reid, the Black Rock Coalition. He's been on the scene forever. Sweet guy, funny. I don't know what he's doing on Halloween, but I hope he's having fun.
And you like his laugh.
I like to hear anybody laugh. Now, people don't know that about me, but I taken a stand-up tragedy, but really I'm a stand-up comedian. You know how fucking funny I am. I either want to make you cry or make you laugh. I prefer to hear you laugh, especially if you laugh like a little girl. Only if I tickle you.
Have you ever made someone do a hybrid cry laugh? Like they're like, but the tears are pulling down.
Oh, okay. So as long as they cry on my thighs, it's all good, babes.
Nice.
And I won't be wearing fishnets. I'll be wearing. You just used your imagination on that. Okay.
Latex?
That's what you should be wearing when you double bag it, motherfucker. I don't know where you think you're going with this Halloween. What you think you're going in me, not as me? I think you better reassess that fact, Timothy doll. Wait a second. This is
all health classes say don't double bag it because it creates friction. You actually higher chance you're gonna rip those. All right.
I got nothing. I got nothing to say about that. I just say keep it clean, keep it sweet. It's Halloween. Put some candy in my bag. I like to trick. I like to treat. It's the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Melvin Gibbs. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl. I do believe Weasel Walter might be joining us.
He'll be joining us, yes.
And our special guest is Melvin Gibbs, and we are just talking about spelunking through the universe, which in a sense, your career has been diving into so many different forms of music.
Sorry.
That's your career. My lips are sealed.
Yeah.
I'll go back to Melvin for a minute. You've investigated, dived in, dipped in, dive to the bottom of, come up the top of so many different movements with so many different kinds of people and so many different sounds using so many different kind of rhythms, pulling this all together from the early 80s that I can't even begin to talk about what you've done because on 200 albums, where are you going to start? Well, let's start with right now. How you doing, Melvin Gibbs?
Well, I'm doing good. It's funny, it's like of all the different things of music, I'm actually right now, I actually kind of made a lateral move and have been doing a bit of like writing, like text writing.
Ooh.
So, yeah. A couple of little things. I did a little thing that's up now on the Jazz Times website about jazz and protest, which is kind of cool. And I'm actually working on a piece that I will finish tonight for...
oh, yes, you will.
The catalog for Milford Graves is having an art exhibit at the ICA in Philly, so I'm working on a piece for that.
My prime creativity may take many shapes, but writing is the basis of everything I do, and I think it's so important for people to get their thoughts down on paper, and it's so important. Like, you just began that. Well, you know what? We're going to be in COVID for a while, so I guess there's going to be an encyclopedia of knowledge that you're going to be putting out online.
Yeah, well, I got to do something until it's safe to get back on the plane. I always tell people my job description, international touring musician, is obsolete until further notice.
Well, we're at the end of the line here. We're literally at the end of the line.
Excuse me. My job description is international cattle prodder. So I will be here making sure you get some of those words up online because when you work with words, even when you work with music, I mean, come on. It's not like you're not doing music. We still do things. It's just we're not doing it in front of an audience right now.
Yeah, exactly.
You're on 200 albums. Hey, go listen to the shit we already did, motherfuckers. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Look, first of all, when you're 30 years ahead of your time, as we all are, there's plenty of time to catch up now, kids.
Exactly. And that's the one good thing about, our era. Our era has, is, if anything, is kind of more pertinent than it was, at the time in certain ways. So You know.
Oh, so what tours and or festivals were canceled for you? Just to name a few. You don't have to name them all during this period.
Well, the main thing, there were 3 people that I was supposed to be on tour with that got canceled. The main one was my own project called Harriet Tubman, the band I have with myself. And we had a whole tour, which included Big Ears.
Oh,
that
cool.
just went.
Bummer.
That just went in the tubes.
Yep.
I had, I also am in a group called the Zigzag Power Trio, which is myself and Vernon Reid and Will Calhoun from Living Color.
Yes, familiar with it too.
And we had a few gigs in that time that got canceled, a couple of which have been resuscitated, but the tour itself is not going to happen.
So that trio has been around since late 80s, early 90s? Is that, I think I remember.
Tubman has been around since since
Tubman,
98.
But the trio, though, I remember seeing.
Oh, and me and Vernon. Well, Vernon is one of my oldest friends, so in various formats, me and him have been playing together since our teens. That particular group is, I think, the first show
91,
was
90.
Somewhere around in there. It was a little later because I was in the Rollins Band at the time, so it probably more like 95, 96 was the first show of the trio with Will and
all right, if we're going to backtrack here, let's just go right back to the beginning. So you're Brooklyn native,
yes.
Right? You start playing bass when?
I started in right in my
bedroom.
In my bedroom, as we all do. And I started in 75. I graduated. I skipped a year of school, so I graduated school a year early, and I went and got a job. And during that year, at the end of my senior year in high school, I went out, got a little job, and bought a bass, and that's when I kind of started playing.
And in your bedroom, it all begins.
It all begins.
Begins in our bedrooms.
Well,
yeah.
But interesting, Melvin. I was reading an interview with Tina Wormworth the other day, and she was basically from that generation. Electric bass players, there was just such a high tier. There was just so many great fucking electric bass players in that time that I'm sure you were taking it all in. So, I mean, what a great time to start learning that instrument where you have some of the best ever just coming out and with their own sound, their own thing, the whole thing.
But how did you... Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Even beyond that, I mean, my main mentors were all incredible musicians. That was the era of like community, the strength of community. And the jazz musicians of Brooklyn had put together a program for the kids so the kids would learn jazz. And literally my first bass teacher was Reggie Workman.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
So, and then.
Did so you played double bass as well?
I did for a while, and I struggled. At one point, I was in, this was years later. This was when I was already living in a room with a couple of good friends of mine. And I was in there like struggling with the bow, German bro, and I finally just was there going, Spurt! And I just said, you know what, I'm already pretty good at electric bass and later for this. And that was it.
What made you decide to go to, as both Weasel and Tim did, go to school for music? Like a lot of people from the same time we came up, didn't know anything, but they still made, they called it music. I did not necessarily call it music, but what made you decide that you needed to go to a music school like Berklee School of Music?
Well, that's one of the great pieces of, I can't even use the term anymore. Well, let's call it, just wrong information. I never actually went to Berklee. That's something that went up there that.
Weird.
I've never been able to get them to take that down. So it is what it is. I don't even care anymore. But I did go to a school called the Brooklyn Conservatory of Music.
Yep.
And I went to my local community college, which is Medgar Evers College.
Yep.
Which happened to be pivotal for me because it actually had a really great music program run by a woman named Dr. Edna Edet, who turned out to be the bassist for the International Sweethearts of Rhythm, which was the famous all-woman jazz group. And she owned like a precision bass that was probably like in single digits. Definitely like one of the first 100 electric basses ever made.
Wow.
And she became like very pivotal. That's the interesting thing about electric bass. I think it's probably because it was a smaller instrument and you could carry it around, and also simply because women understand bass, that a lot of the great bass players are women, and so.
Carol Kay was of the time, yes. And, those early electric basses, of course, it's ridiculous how expensive those fucking things are now. Yeah. But go ahead.
To go ahead and answer the question, I mean, I taught myself first. I went and ordered this thing called, I don't even know if they still make it anymore. Dick Grove had this kind of like correspondence course for music. So I ordered all of the books and I went through all of the books. And then I decided to go to school because in my neighborhood, it was just such a high level of musicianship that
what neighborhood was that in Brooklyn? Where was that?
Well, when I was a little kid, I lived in Bed-Stuy, and in third grade, my parents decided to move to a street that happens to be the dividing line between Flatbush and Ditmas Park. Okay. So I can claim either or both.
Yep.
And my musical cohort is basically from Flatbush and Crown Heights. Mm-hmm. And Crown Heights, and Medgar Evers College was located in Crown Heights, so that's where all my musician friends came from. And one of the interesting side notes that I always tell people about Ditmas Park is that, to me, when I see Bernie Sanders, he's like a memory from my youth. He's like the quintessential like Ditmas Park father, you know what I mean?
It's a beautiful, it's a gorgeous neighborhood. It's a beautiful neighborhood.
Those Victorians, All
right, so you're in school or you're getting out of school. How do you immediately hook up with, you pretty much jump right into the scene, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, it was it was an interesting kind of journey because, my neighborhood is a lot of Caribbean Black people. So that was kind of the milieu of music I was in. And the neighborhood, the group that lived directly in the area where I lived in Ditmas Park was a group called BT Express. So those were like my friend Carlos Ward, the saxophonist, was in that group. And, but I ended up playing in a band with one of the first bands I was in was a band called Point of View, was with Vernon Reid, who I met at Medgar Evers. And what ended up happening is I just kind of got tired of sort of athletic virtuoso music, and I got tired of pop music, and I kind of just started looking around for some other people to play with, and I ended up falling in with this group of musicians from St. Louis who had a loft on the Lower East Side. At the same time, I was playing up at Harlem with some of the older jazz guys, and just the timing of my age was I was the kid who came in who understood their music because Reggie and them had taught me. So I understood their music, but I had like a new flavor. So I kind of became the default bass player for everybody who was trying to there was 3 or 4 of us that all the older jazz guys would call when they were kind of trying to refresh their music, either to bring in like a funk thing or kind of a more modern sound.
And how cool and kind and accepting is that at that time, especially. And that, obviously says, well, I'm on the right path now.
Yeah.
I'm not stopping now.
Yeah. And when you say three or four of us, specifically, who else was in that 3 or 4?
Well, I'm thinking about now. I mean, the guys that, well, that's a different thing. I mean, when I think about bass players of my generation, I mean, obviously the top one is Marcus Miller, right?
Yep.
All right. So, but Marcus was kind of on another path. I mean, I'm from Brooklyn. Marcus is from Queens, and from my generation, it's this big Queens Brooklyn rivalry. So everybody knows about everybody.
Jamaica Queens, right? Is it the whole Jamaica Queens scene?
Yeah, that Jamaica Queens scene. So we knew those guys, and the one guy who would kind of cross over was Omar Hakim. So I used to play with Omar. I played with Omar a bunch, before I met, before I got on the scene when we were all still kids. And it was pretty obvious then that Marcus was going to be the one who was, even before anybody knew who he was, that he was going to be like the one.
Now I heard that he went to LaGuardia as a clarinetist, and then he would try to impress girls. They'd do slap bass competitions at the cafeteria during lunch. and that's how he learned how to play the bass. I don't know if that's true. That's true.
That makes me sad. One thing about me, I have never, and this, I mean, for better or worse, I did not start playing music to impress girls, and I have never played. I mean, they get impressed, whatever. I'm not stopping them from getting impressed.
Melvin,
that's not the reason I'm doing it.
I don't think that was Marcus's only motivation, but initially how he learned bass.
1 second. Melvin, I'm sure you have many other talents that impress the ladies.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Let's just say. And also, let's look at it this way. You were, I mean, especially the group that you were in, I mean, especially jazz, funk, avant jazz, out jazz, it is pretty male dominated and male audience. So, you know, you might not have impressed the ladies with that, but no doubt you were impressing a lot of the men because you were bridging all of these different styles and with all these different people, and from Harlem then to the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
So you're going from these old jazz dudes, and then you're coming up with these young avant funk jazz. We don't want to just why do we have to call it a genre?
Exactly.
Which is what became like with Defunkt and all these other bands. Funk. So you're going from school to Harlem and the Lower East Side. Now, all right, what were those gigs when you were doing these gigs up in Harlem? Were they actual gigs? Were they studio gigs? Were they just playing with these guys? Because when you came down to the Lower East Side, you were doing a lot of gigs.
Yeah, well, before I answer that, since you asked, and since we're talking about Queens, there's one bass player who I have to shout out. And one of the reasons is because the first time I heard this person play, I had to go back home and practice. And that is Kim Clark, who is one of the Queens. She's another one of the Queens musicians. And at that time, she was in a band with Trevor Gale, Solar Caravan, who Trevor's now important because he was one of the early kind of hip hop drum machine programmers. But at that time he had a jazz band and he was playing with Nona Hendrix. But to answer your question, in Harlem was like the proving grounds, the hell or whatever. And that was like playing I used to mostly play it at a club called the Breeze and Lounge, which was where Dr. Lonnie Smith had his organ. So he was like the person that I played with the most out of those set of guys. And it was one of those things, 5 sets a night for very little money. And I mean, I used to in those days, you know, I would literally had this little amp that I would put in a shopping cart and hop on the subway and take the train up and do the 5 sets and then get back. But at the time, my parents were going to church or whatever. You know.
So what about Albert McDowell?
He's another one. Another one of the Queens crew. You know, those are all the Queens. That was the Queens contingent. Manhattan was TM Stevens.
All right.
He was the big boy at that time. Francisco Centeno. I mean, those are the ones that come originally. But Francisco wasn't so much on our scene. TM is the one that would cross over a lot as well.
I remember you once mentioning that you thought Anthony Jackson was kind of in a league of his own. Do you still believe that?
Yes.
I read it. Yeah. I mean, this guy, it's like too good. It's like, oh my God, how's this possible?
The problem with Anthony, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a problem, but he's been negatively affected by playing with Latin musicians. They will stiffen you up if you let them.
Wow.
Melvin, I would stiffen you up if you let me. I'm just saying. I'm just trying to
Duly
make
noted.
So how did you start working with Ronald Shan Jackson?
I was in a band in Harlem with a band called Band of Music, and it turned out that the drummer in that band was actually the percussionist in Primetime. And the guitar player in that band was Bern Nix.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Bern, after a few rehearsals, Bern just kind of pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, I think you can play harmonic." And I'm kind of like, "Yeah, whatever." And he pulled out this weird looking piece of music for me. And we played it. And he said, "Okay, I'm going to give your number to a drummer friend of mine." And that's how I ended up playing with Shannon. And kind of pretty much simultaneously with that, I was playing with this reggae band with some guys in the neighborhood, and we played at, I don't know if y'all remember Tier 3 in Tribeca.
Oh, I do. I used to play there a lot.
Yeah, we played Tier 3, and an old friend of mine who was literally in the first band I was ever in came walking with a man that y'all probably don't remember, a man named Alphonia Timms, who was a great guitar player, composer. And he's like, what you doing? I said, I just started playing with this drummer named Ronald Shannon Jackson. He said, hey, I'm playing guitar with James Blood Omer. So he brought me over to Blood's house, and that's how I met Blood, and Rashid was there because they were all in the neighborhood at the time. So I met Rashid and that whole Soho crew at Blood's house. And it turned a couple of weeks later. I love telling the story, but y'all haven't heard it, so I can tell it again. A couple of weeks later, Alphonia called me, and he's kind of like, hey, we're having a rehearsal at this place at Prince Street. And he gave me the address. So I'm kind of like, okay, great. So, put on my bass, go hiking over there. And it wasn't till I got to the building that I realized where the hell I was going. No, it was Ornette's house. So
my God.
So we get an elevator, go up to Ornette's place, and basically we gave a command performance of 3, Alphonia, myself, and the drummer for Ornette. And we played for about 45 minutes. And when we stopped, literally the first thing out of Ornette's mouth was, Melvin, where'd you learn how to play like that? And I was kind of like, I didn't really have a response. I was just like, this is just what I do. I don't know. I just do it.
Was this like 79, 80?
This was kind of like in middle of 79.
Yeah.
Middle of 79. And then from then I just kind of became a part of that crew.
Cool.
And I mean, I'd already been playing with Shannon anyway, and then it kind of all connected. So that became my crew for a while. I
mean, you must have felt like, I'm home. This is it. This is what I'm born to do. I'm where I need to be. Or were you a bit like, how the hell did I even get here? I bet. A bit of both.
Well, it was more because I had started playing late, and I felt like I wasn't quite at the level that I wanted to be, that I was just really, I was literally practicing like 4 or 5 hours a day at that point. I was just in constant shed mode for like the whole of, for that whole period of my life. So just to kind of, to keep up with those guys and to absorb and to but the good thing about it is that whatever I got from people, I kind of absorbed it immediately. So all the new information kind of came right into my body and became a part of what I was doing. But go ahead.
And also taking all of that in from all of these different flavors and being able to accept, and then made you probably decide that you didn't want to just go in one direction. You were going to go in all these different directions because you were able to comprehend that you could be like an octopus.
Yeah, and the community of at the time was just so open. I mean, the kind of other backstory of all of this is once I kind of started playing on the scene, especially once on one hand, I was part of the whole Ornette crew because Alphonia had brought me in. But on the other hand, as I said earlier, I was part of that whole St. Louis crew. When Joe Bowie hooked up with James Chance, we all ended up coming into your scene. And I ended up, we were like the blacks of James White and the blacks, and we ended up doing that for a while. And the interesting thing about that was there was a kid from my neighborhood who I knew very well from the neighborhood who I didn't see that, or I hadn't seen for a few months that I started running into all the time. And that's kid used to call himself Samo in the neighborhood, John Michelle.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Yes, exactly. Flatbush Junction. Is that where yeah.
He's from what do they call that now over there? PLG. He's from over there from like Linden Boulevard, that area.
Yeah,
Lefferts Gardens.
Yeah, big Haitian community over there. I'm correct. Yeah. So this is a slightly technical question as a bass player, but it seemed like the zeitgeist of the time, and maybe it's the way albums were mixed, but the kind of punchy mid-range, hyper-present tone, which I guess back in the day, you kind of had that. Jamaluddin did. Even Jocko. Would you say your sound has changed as the?
I hated that sound.
You hated that sound. Wow, you hated that. Did you hate that sound because it wasn't your sound, or is that just you were learning and you're going along with it? Tell me about that.
Let me say, I mean, I grew, as I told you, I'm from Flatbush, Smith Park. I grew up around Jamaicans. That's the sound that resonates for me. I mean, it works for Jamal. I mean, Jamal was one of the first people to have a Steinberger, and Jamal playing a Steinberger, I'm never mad at that. But for me, I always wanted to have a sound that had a lot of bass. So it was always a struggle for me. And I mean, I don't mind the way the stuff I did at that time sounds. It took a while before the sound that I was hearing in my head is the sound that ended up on records. And I always say that's one reason so many bass players become producers, because you kind of get tired of, okay, my bass doesn't sound the way I want it to sound. So the only way I'm going to get it to sound the way I want it to sound is to actually be in charge of this.
Okay. And do you play mostly five string now? Was that parallel your sound changing and going to five string more?
Well, I always detune my bass. I mean, because a lot of the jazz guys did. I mean, Ron Carter used to do it. Michael Henderson did it with Miles. And I always wanted to at least be able to go down to low D at any time, So as soon as, and that's one of the reasons, Anthony Jackson's one of the sort of pioneers of the low string instrument, which is one of the reasons he's kind of an icon. And as soon as I was able to kind of find one that I liked the way it sounded and afford, I just jumped right to it. And that was really the kind of beginning of me kind of honing in of what I actually wanted to sound like. Again, talking about whenever you talk about people from the neighborhood who were just iconic, obviously the most famous icon from the neighborhood now is John Michelle, right?
Right.
Second to that is Vernon, right? Because of what Living Colour was able to do as a group. But the one who is iconic for all of us as musicians, everybody, is Arthur Rames. He was just incredible on multiple levels. I mean, I was playing, as I told you, I met Rashid Ali through Blood. And I ended up playing after that, I started playing with Rashid for a while. When Rashid heard Arthur, he just fired all of us. He was like, y'all got to go. I got this kid. I don't need y'all no more. And he said, this is the person that reminds me the most of John, of anyone I played with. And Arthur was just incredible on multiple instruments. He was an incredible saxophonist. He was an incredible guitar player, incredible keyboard player. He did us a very great favor. All of the cishet guys of my era. He died of AIDS, right? And that really kind of forced all of us who had any kind of ambivalence about, alternative sexualities to drop it. Because, we just all loved him so much. He was the catalyst for, on multiple levels, just opening people's minds up. And the other thing about it is, because he was our age, it wasn't like, even talking to guys like Reggie or the older guys who were mentoring us, there was this wall, but we had this person who was literally our age, who we could talk to, call on the phone, go hang with, who was incredible. So what it did was just make all of us go home and be like, okay, we got to hang with him, so we got to be good. So he just raised the bar for everybody,
And not only musically, but intellectually and philosophically about what is going down right then in New York, which while so much was going down in so many positive ways, there was a lot of negativity going down besides the crime, besides the drug addiction, besides AIDS, besides just, the bankruptcy, besides the burnouts, besides the blackout. I mean, we took from it the best we could, but people don't realize really how hard that period was. Because, you could focus on what the glory we reaped or wrecked from it was, but it was very hard times. And death like now was ever present, and poverty like now was ever present, and crime like now, which is rising, was just outrageous. So, I mean, in a sense, that's why I think this period is kind of a bookend to the late 70s. And even though like now we have to quarantine, then it was the opposite. Then we were just out every single night. Then you could not keep us in the house. Now we have no place to go. So it's kind of this full circle bookend to that period, but it doesn't mean that we're going to be less creative. Comes a period when you just have to reflect on what you have done, and people might not be able to catch up, face it, they can't, but that doesn't matter. Look, they know who we are. Go ahead and listen, kids. But it really is kind of a full circle bookend in a sense to that period. And I think that contemplation, as I like to call it, right now is so important. And also to not forget how much we have experienced, how much we have gained. And this is what I don't especially want people to forget. And this is coming from, a satanic nihilist or some might think. How much fucking beauty there still is in this world, right outside your window. Like, you have to really appreciate beauty right now. Because if you don't, they're winning by killing you with fucking fear, contamination, poison, COVID, death, poverty, and all of the other abuse they try to heap upon us every day. So we have got to go for the music, for the art, for the beauty, for the community. And I am, like you are, like any of us, they're not going to win. Because we're still fucking here.
No, they're not going to win.
You don't have to vote for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting.
I'm already the fucking queen. You
Yes,
don't
you
have,
are.
excuse me, the king of New York, excuse me.
The king. Well, it's interesting that you bring the days, because I remember, I guess that was the Tuesday or Wednesday after Mr. Floyd was murdered, when everything was going crazy. My phone died. Right. So I hopped on the bike and rode across the bridge to go get my phone fixed. And while I was waiting for my phone to get fixed, I decided to go ride into Soho because allegedly there had been so much mayhem. Yes. So I went to go see the mayhem. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't see much mayhem. I rode around the whole neighborhood. I saw very specific mayhem. The kids had broken the Balenciaga. They had broken into Prada. They had broken into all the designer, but then everything else was kind of the way it was. And I remember thinking to myself, my aunt and my grandmother lived in the South Bronx. And I remember thinking to myself,
remember when?
The South Bronx looked much worse than this, and they didn't do shit about it. Right. They broke 2 windows downtown, and all of a sudden it's anarchy. So it just becomes a question of who's telling the story at that point.
I want to address that for 1 minute. First of all, I don't give a shit about all these name brands that charge too much for crap that gets made in China anyway. People want to loot that shit, that's fine. What I don't like about it, and certainly don't go looting the mom and pop shops, don't loot your own neighborhood. But the thing is, what I don't like is the mentality of looting these name brands as if they're some kind of status, because the thing is, you're putting status on the wrong fucking thing. When poor people are wearing shit they can't afford, or what is it called, bootlegs, because they think that makes them something else. It's like, what you wear is not what you fucking are. And this is what Nike and all these other fucking companies have turned fucking poor kids into ultimate consumers and or thieves if need be. And the thing is, that ain't the value of your worth. Now, I am not against looting stores. That shit is ridiculous, overpriced. Who fucking cares? Do not loot the mom and pops. But you got to realize what you're doing. If you're looting to sell, I can't blame you. If you're looting it because you think this shit matters, that you're wearing somebody else's name, you know what? You want to wear a name, you can buy one of my fucking face masks. You don't even know who I am. Don't be wearing the fucking name tags of the enemy. This is what I don't get. Kids want to wear the name tags and the brands of the enemy, and this has been going on for a long time. Like the Nike swastika. This don't mean, what the hell? This is the enemy.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things, again, going back to what people of our era have to offer this era. I mean, our era, that era, everybody had their own style, and you would go to St. Mark's Place and go buy like a 50-cent shirt or whatever. And you would just flip that 50, and then, you buy 4 things that cost like your whole outfit costs like $5, whatever. But your outfit would be fire because of the way you put it together. And then they eventually just started ripping off those fashions, and those fashions became the real fashions. It's this idea, and I think this idea that you can be yourself, what I mean, whoever you happen to be. That's something that I think our generation has to offer the kids,
So Melvin, we wanted to ask you. So you're playing all this art music. You're downtown,
yeah,
and then you get these pop gigs. You get Rollins.
Rollins.
Well, hey, it's pop rock. I mean, it is top 40. He's on TV and all that shit. But one question. Yeah. One question. Actually, it's not where I was actually really going to go. and maybe it's personal, I don't know. How come you never got the Living Color call? Considering there's two other bass players, Muzz and Doug Wimbish.
Well, in the beginning, as I've said multiple times, Vernon is one of my best friends. In the beginning, I just felt like he should have his own band, that he didn't have some other person who was going to have an opinion about what he should be doing with his band. And that's so that's why in the beginning, I wasn't a part of it. And later on, it was just, I think when Muzz quit, I think I was signed. That's when I was signed to Sony. So that's why we didn't do, that's why I was doing my own band at the time. And plus, it was just, to me, it was just kind of a no-brainer to get Doug in the band.
What was signed to Sony?
I had a band. It was a band called I that came and went, unfortunately.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, I shouldn't put it that way because Vernon doesn't need my protection, but I just really felt, I've always from the beginning felt like he's got his own vision. And it was obvious to me early on that a lot of people just didn't get what he was doing. And I have my own vision, and I didn't really want those two visions to be clashing, and it turned out that his vision was actually very correct. He knew what he needed to do for himself. I'll put it that way. So I'm very happy for him. It's like I said, now, again, going back to Arthur, that's one of the things that Arthur kind of gave everybody in the neighborhood. We just really, because of him, we just kind of really all pull for each other. You know what I mean? It's not that we're competitive, but not against each other.
What was it like playing with the Rollins Band for so long? And that's kind of when they went more metal in a sense, but that's pretty heavy touring. And Rollins, he's a work dog.
Yeah. For me, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time, It was kind of like, it was really interesting, for me, interesting musically. Because it kind of fell in my sweet spot as far as what I wanted to do. And the thing I loved about Henry and still love is that he just always gives 100%. So I kind of compare playing with him to playing with Sonny Sharrock, because when Sonny went on stage, there was, basically there would be like blood on the floor afterwards. There was nothing left when the gig was over. And Henry was the same way. So that's the thing that I really vibed about with dealing with him.
Nothing was left except for his tiny little shorts. Because, that was about all the pleasure you were going to squeeze out of that man, because he does work very hard. Works very hard.
Yeah, well, I always tell people I'm 3/4 of a straight edge, so there you go. Because
yeah, but how about throwing that other quarter in my direction, baby? Straight edge? What do you mean, like a razor blade? I don't know what you think straight edge. But you don't think I'm straight? I'm so straight. I'm fucking queer. I'm so straight. I'm a man. This is what I don't even get it. I don't have any idea. Anyway, let's go back to your musical career, because I think there's still plenty of you that could be squeezed out. And
you want to talk about Black Rock Coalition?
Yeah,
very important thing. Very important thing. Yes.
It's interesting because I just got an email from one of the executives. This is the 35th anniversary, and they wanted some memories. Black Rock Coalition was basically, I can't find out later. I actually had a gig with my band at this place called Tracks. I don't know if y'all remember that. It was up in the 80s. And basically kind of nobody showed up.
Ever up there. Yeah. Nobody went up there. It was horrible.
And one of the few people that came was Vernon, and Vernon was just so offended by the fact that no one showed up that he decided to put an organization together to kind of coalesce everything. One of the backstories to that is back when I was still living in Brooklyn, we had an organization in the neighborhood that was called Kona, kind of based off of the idea of the ACM. And that was a really interesting organization because at that time there were a bunch of African Americans from San Francisco, from the Bay Area, who had moved to Brooklyn. They were all kind of living in the general neighborhood. So it was kind of a combination of our crew from the neighborhood and these kind of San Francisco expats. And one of them was Sapphire, who she wrote the book that Precious is based off of. So
before
Vernon,
the Black Rock Coalition.
Yeah. So Vernon has always been kind of this sort of community kind of arts organizer. So he decided to put this thing together. And the interesting thing about it is that it was such an eclectic crew at that first meeting. You know, it was me and Vernon, Conda Mason, who was the artist manager. Actually, Jerry Allen, the piano player, was one of the original members as well. Actually, Craig Street, who ended up producing the Cassandra Wilson records that blew up, he's one of the original members. So it was this kind of, it ended up coalescing the scene of people who kind of were scattered across the city who didn't know that each other existed, you know. And
and also because, I mean, if you jumping between all these different various scenes, right? You know how actually they were very segregated at the time. I mean, there wasn't many black people on the no wave scene coming into that. We don't know why. There wasn't many black people coming to my spoken word. Don't know why. I'm talking about issues that related to them. It was a very segregated, even though we didn't want it to be, that wasn't by choice. We weren't purposely segregating. We're just like, we were amazed. There were 10 people at any show. But I don't care what color they were. No. But, you know, and you're playing in Harlem. I'm sure there's not many white people going up to see those gigs.
No, it was not just those days.
And so something like Black Rock Coalition, and when people within or outside, like within an extended circle, don't even know who's doing what, and of course, this is all before the internet, that was a very important thing to try to get people aware of what's going on. Like, hey, we're all doing this. We got to be supporting each other.
People don't remember that Sony, you know, is whatever, the multiple beefs I have with Sony had to threaten to take all of their videos off of MTV to get them to play Michael Jackson's video.
Oh, I heard about, yes. CBS, that was really, didn't Quincy Jones threaten? Didn't he? A few people got involved in threatening, yeah.
So, I mean, that's where that was like literally the biggest record ever sold, you know, for many years. And they had to threaten to get that one. So that's kind of where things were back then.
Well, and also tell us some of the priorities of the Black Rock Coalition, because first of all, I mean, I think one of the things is making aware, because why were people not, that first of all, rock and roll, if you want to call it that, it is black music. It comes from black music. It was just that no black rockers were getting any attention at this point.
That was the major point. I was talking about all the, you know, the great bass players out of Queens. From my neighborhood, it was like all these incredible guitar players, people like Arthur and Vernon, and this idea that rock music was some foreign thing was not a foreign thing to us. We didn't find out until we started trying to gig that people thought it was a foreign thing.
Excuse me, where does it come from?
Yeah.
Where did it come from? Yeah. Rock and roll.
Exactly.
The blues. Who played the blues? Basically, almost exclusively black.
Yeah.
Blues.
Well,
so there we go.
That gets into the whole history of American music. But what had happened at that time was, you know, like guys like Omar and Marcus and and TM and all of those guys, they were all, you know, okay, so Joe Cocker will hire TM and Madonna will hire Omar. But if they put their own band together, they're not going to get signed, you know. So because we were so seen better as sort of cogs in somebody else's machine. And that was one of the other main priorities, you know, again, kind of based off the model of the ACM at the time, where instead of kind of begging somebody to help us, we would just kind of put our own gigs together. And having said that, I mean, Hilly was kind of instrumental, you know what I mean? Because Hilly was just kind of like, okay, I'll do it.
I mean, sure, you know, so it smells like dog shit. So there might be 10 or 100 people there. So don't eat the food. Don't even use one of the glasses. Forget the bathrooms. Well, I can, because I had a lot of good times in there. But I'm just saying, in spite of what it was, which was a dump on the Bowery under a bum's hotel, smelling a dog shit with the meanest woman ever, Hilly's wife, and his fat daughter, he gave everybody a chance to fucking play it there.
Yeah. And
we all did.
Yeah.
We all did.
So we loved Hilly, and Hilly was like, you know, and then because Hilly got on board, everyone was kind of like, oh, okay, this is a real thing. I knew at the time, and I kind of buried because there were so many other things going on in my world. One of the actually early supporters was an anonymous donor from Minneapolis.
Oh, I wonder who that was.
Well, no matter what they gave, I wish they would have given 10 times as much. I'm just saying. So, of course, any kind of community-based, making people aware. It should be easier now with the internet, but I mean, community is so important, no matter how much. But I want to jump into this. You're jumping between all these different scenes, all these different vibes, all these different kind of musical genres. What is the first no wave gig you actually saw?
The first no wave gig?
No wave. I mean, that you call no wave.
The first one that well, that's funny because, you know, I'm a loft jazz guy. Basically, that's my,
yeah.
So it was like two parallel worlds that, again, talking about the Black Rock Cult, they were two parallel worlds that didn't cross. So
that's what I'm saying.
I have to say the actual first gig, and this is going to sound really hilarious. It wasn't actually a gig. It was a rehearsal. That was when I was, I guess, was I already playing with James then? Yes, I was already playing with James. And the location of everything at that time was the Squat Theater, right? So I was at the Squat so much, I had clothes there because, you know, the family was living there, and I just kind of like, okay, I'll just leave stuff there. And I went there to pick up some clothes, and there was this infernal racket going on in the basement. So I went down to see what the infernal racket was, and it was this Japanese girl on drums, and this wild ass
DNA.
So that would count as the first one. You know?
But your mind was expansive enough to understand, even though this was, I mean, no wave is not, you know, it's not a musical. It's based more on opposition. You still had an open enough mind to go, I got to investigate some of this, even working with Ardo Lindsay.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you know, free jazz is oppositional in a different way. You know, I didn't, and like I said, James reached out to Joe Bowie, James Siegfried Chance, to put a band together, and you know, Joe called me, and we all went down there. And it was interesting because I went to the rehearsal, and you know, James threw the music out there, and I played the music, and James asked me, "Well, what do you think of the music?" I said, "Hey, it sounds like Fela." I said, "Hey, it sounds like Fela to me," and he said, "Wow, you're the first person who ever noticed that."
Like Fela?
Fela Kuti.
What?
Fela Kuti.
Yeah.
Sounds like Fela Kuti?
Yeah, you
got a vivid imagination stretching that wide.
No, that's what he was going for. The way the rhythms fit together, and
look, the contortions for that very short period were absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
you know, he had a quick fall, but that original stuff was just it was magnificent.
Yeah,
it was grand.
And so then from there it just became like I just got into you know I was kind of coming from the other side because I was already doing the hard melodic stuff anyway. So it's not. It's kind of like degrees. I mean, obviously there were better musicians on the jazz side than on the no wave side.
Excuse me. You want to say that one more time? No doubt. There were not musicians for the most part on the no. Yeah. No wave was not about being musical. It was about being It was about being against all tradition. Except for the most musical was James Chance.
Well, I'll tell you. You know, this is a story.
In a sense.
This is a story you'll appreciate. The first gig I did with James was at Squat, and I'm playing the gig, and then James calls a bass solo, and I stopped playing my solo, and there had been a woman who was basically like dancing in front of me like the whole gig. She started humping the monitor, like to my bass solo, and that was the moment I fell in love with no wave. I was like, this is the greatest music in the world. So
all right, well, I have to say, as like the queen of no wave, I would think that my music might have given all but a very select few a lack of an erection for about 6 months. Now, those that did get a hard on probably still have it to this day. I'm just speaking from experience.
You're like Viagra. They needed to see their doctor after
excuse me.
Priapism. It's called a priapism.
I call it the Lydian school of medicine. Don't worry about it, honey. I got you covered.
Well, I just want to talk about you're talking about fashion. You're in all the individuality that was encouraged. The supportive group that you grew up around, all the creative musicians. So what did it feel like when Columbia Jazz started pushing this kind of Young Lions, clean-cut, conservative thing? You know, when that started being really pushed, and you're so involved in the loft scene in downtown, did you feel like you were butting heads, or you just kind of ignored it, or you're just a completely different world?
That was around the time the BRC started. So we were already kind of pivoting by that point. You know, we were kind of like, because, the whole kind of conservative thing. I mean, because that's all kind of concurrent with Reagan becoming president.
Totally,
and all of
totally.
That. And yeah, we'd already kind of, we were already kind of moving out of that into our own, trying to get our own flavor happening. So as far as being I was still doing stuff in the jazz world, but it wasn't really my main focus at that point. And then, this kind of weird, and then everything kind of like fell apart. I was supposed to go on this tour, and I found out like literally a week before the tour, that the tour wasn't happening, and that was going to be like my rent for like months. And so I kind of hopped on the subway and went to Manhattan, walked into Tower Records, and it happened one of my good friends from the neighborhood was in there, and I was kind of like, hey, what's going on? And an hour later, I had a job there, so that kind of became what I was doing, and that ended up being I ended up becoming a buyer at the store, and I was the world music buyer, and so I didn't. What that did was kind of give me a bridge. I actually took that job for two reasons. One, the main reason was because in the short term,
pay the rent.
But the other reason was to kind of learn what was going on the other side of the business, learn, and to see if it was even something that I wanted to do. Because on the other hand, I was playing with Sonny at the time. I was playing with Sonny Sharrock, and Sonny had been driving a limo for years. Sonny didn't even care about the music business, Right. So it was really a question for me, like, okay, so what do I really want to do? A bunch of things happened at that time. I took that same year I took to learn how to actually like write like songs, like a songwriter. I like studied Motown songs and learned forms. So that was kind of like a study year. And then once that year passed and I kind of didn't really need that job anymore, I kind of just stuck with it just to kind of, get free stuff and have what
people don't realize is musicians. We could be working, and most of us have 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
We're still poor. It's
Yeah.
like, unless there's a fluke and you hit it big, or unless you could find a way to actually keep on the road, which now that's impossible.
Yeah.
They don't realize, and this is why I always discourage people. Like, they say, what advice do you have to young musicians? Like, don't do it. Become a chemist. We need better drugs. Become a scientist. Become an architect. Don't do it. Do you want to live a life of poverty? Because trust me, all of the geniuses that we have respected, were any of them rich? I can't think of any. Whether they were, rock is a different thing. I'm talking about jazz. I'm talking about truly adventurous, visionary musicians. It's a fluke if they get rich.
Yeah.
Most people have been ripped off. And if you haven't been ripped off, there just is not enough money. And how I haven't had a day job, I have no idea, because I'm a better hustler than most people. But I also don't have big expectations about things.
Yeah.
It is not something you go into. You got to have a backup. If you want to do music, if it doesn't burn in your blood, you better not do it. If it burns in your blood, you might have to realize you might be sleeping on the sidewalk.
Yeah. So that is the thing for people who want to do this. You got to be willing to like suffer. But it's interesting, today, because because people talk about the gig economy. And I always say, wow, that means that everybody's living like a musician.
Exactly.
We do what we do because we love it. So if it sucks, if we got to stay up 12 hours to make less money than we're supposed to, okay, we love it. But if you're driving a cab and you got to drive 14 hours to make musician money.
I always say my job, my job is 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. That's it. It's like, you don't want this life. And by the way, it better burn you. Otherwise, don't do it. Don't think there's any glory. You know what the glory is in? Knowing you do what you had to fucking do, what you were born to do. And if you didn't do it, you might have imploded. That's it. And, name any of your heroes that weren't. Rock is a different thing. It's not, you do it because you're a prophet, not because you want profits.
Exactly. And for me, when I was a kid, I was a big, before I started playing music, I was a big record collector anyway. So working in a record store, I didn't mind that as a job. And then that ended up becoming what we call the halfway house, because when I was working there, Tim Byrne was working there. Then I brought in Brandon, when he was working there for a while. Wadada worked there for a while. Ralph Moore. It just ended up becoming, and then we basically kind of made our own schedule and our own system. So but then
record stores, bookstores, video stores, or telephone sex. That's what it was back in the day. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to wrap this up. Tim Dahl, anything more you want to squeeze out of this virile musician?
Gerald Jones or Gerald Veasley. Go.
Oh, that's not a good. That's not.
I'm teasing.
But Gerald, they're both my dudes. I love Gerald. The Odin Pope Trio is one of my favorite groups of all time. That's the only other group. Just like when you talk to Bootsy will say Fela is the only group that they were ever like, okay, this group is ridiculous.
Well, you know what? I'm going to get back to you about me talking to Bootsy later on. So I would love to talk to Bootsy about what is and what isn't. No biggie.
Yeah.
Melvin, I'm so happy that you have such good attitude, that you've done all that you have done. You're not stopping. You know what? Quarantine, COVID, we're not dying.
Nope.
My neighborhood, 0 COVID. And you know what? Time to reflect. You have done a lot, my friend. More to come. All I can say. And you know what? Come over here sometime. I'll show you what's coming.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming down, doing this.